community meeting. We have quite a few items on the agenda today, but before we start, please add your name to the attendees list. And okay, for instance, okay, let me also share my screen with the agenda. Where is this? All right, so I think we can get started. So the first item in the agenda is a discussion about gateways and ingresses. And there are multiple related topics which are fairly important for 1.0. So I hope Shriram is also online, or Frank. If not, that's a pity. As everybody probably heard, we're going to ship 1.0 somewhere in the time frame between August 27th and July 27th and July 30th. And we're trying to get everything in shape. And one of the items that are still not super user-friendly is the usage of a secure gateway.
Getting certificates.
Yeah, exactly. And more precisely, the certificate generation and loading. And I think Austin will give us a better overview and understanding of what the problem is. And this ties also a bit with how we deploy the Kubernetes Ingress. So there are the two items here are a bit related. So the question is if we deploy Kubernetes Ingress by default or not. And maybe, Kostin, you want to talk about the issues with the certificate managers and the dependency on Ingress that you discovered?
Yeah, I don't know if everyone has context here. We definitely want to have some way for people to be able to use Acme protocol to get certificates automatically. And to do that, the solutions that is typically used and seems to be the common is a cert manager package, which is an implementation of the protocol and is able to get certificates automatically. That library right now, I mean, the version that is current of that library requires the use of Ingress. We do have, I mean, it worked before, it worked in 08, it worked in 07 with Istio Ingress. The problem I'm having is that right now it doesn't work with gateway. So if you are using Ingress resources and the Ingress gateway, you can use a cert library and you can get certificate for that particular domain.
Oh, however, you could use a DNS challenge though.
Using DNS challenge, again, it requires that the user has DNS control over the entire DNS of an organization. So if you are typically people who test or who develop for Istio are not the admin of the entire domain, and they do not have control over the entire DNS. I mean, you know, it's not trivial for some providers, some DNS providers, they have API access and it is possible to use a DNS challenge, but it requires a person who is getting a certificate for my test whatever to have the password for the entire DNS and to place this password in a secret in Kubernetes.
Sure.
You could use kind of an out of band. I mean, you can probably use your own, let's encrypt directly. I mean, you can use other means to get the certificate, and that's what most larger enterprises will likely do.
So this is because when I deploy a new application, I want to get a new certificate and add it to the Ingress.
Yeah.
Also, right? So I would need to have access as a simple app developer,
yes,
or like somebody who just deploys the app. to this DNS challenger.
Yes, that's the whole point. And the question is, if you use a DNS challenger, that means a DNS admin, who controls the entire DNS for the entire organization, will give you the password and credentials or permission, and then you'll put this permission into the cert manager.
Mm-hmm.
And cert manager will at that point have access to the entire DNS, and then will be able to create a TXT record to respond to the challenge.
But it's like there has to be a DNS entry pointing to the Ingress, right? So there has to be something, and the same guy who or the same people who do that could actually configure a cert manager that has the credentials, because it's not the user that needs to have them. But I'll just let you continue. I just wanted to throw in that there's another means of challenges in the Acme protocol that would be an option.
No, to be clear, I completely agree. I think for most enterprises that's not a problem, because they will just not use cert manager. They will have an admin that will buy a certificate from a normal provider. That's what most companies are doing anyway. So it's not really a major problem. That it's just that for ease of development for developers who are, it's one thing to go to the admin and get an IP address in the DNS server. It's an entirely different story to say, hey, I need the password for the DNS to put it in the cluster and to use cert manager.
Yeah, I agree.
I think at least a DNS challenge is the right way to get a DNS certificate if you are the DNS admin, but you will use your own means. Use other libraries.
Yep, true.
Costin, we're talking about custom domains, right? We're not talking about the case where all domains for workloads on a cluster are handled by a wildcard cert. You're talking about the use case of I'm an app developer and I put a workload on my K8s cluster and I want a custom domain for it. Is that the problem you're trying to solve?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I need a certificate for that custom domain put on the gateway. Yep.
And the easiest way that most people use is to use the Acme Let's Encrypt protocol.
Yeah, so an enterprise, as you described, have their own means of getting the certificates. And the persona who's going to configure has access to the certificates and is going to configure that certificate on the gateway is not the app developer.
Yes. In most companies, that's what will happen. I don't expect any large enterprise to bother and to enable this option. But for small developers who are just doing a proof of concept or doing some sort of testing or whatever, it is common. Many small enterprises are relying on Acme because it's a free certificate and it's very easy to get. You don't have to pay for it. So you don't have to go through a lot of pain. It's not only the money, but also the difficulty in the steps required to get the certificate from a normal provider. So anyway, that's the story. It's a narrow case. It's simplifying for a particular set of users. We have a solution which is use the Ingress controller, get the certificate, and then switch to virtual service.
So that's one of the solutions, right? So
that's what works today. I tested that. It's a few extra steps, but you do it once, because when you renew, you don't have to do it again. Renewal is using the previous certificate, and it's fine.
So you're basically saying we deploy Kubernetes Ingress, and then we do the translation from Kubernetes Ingress to Gateway plus virtual service.
We enable the Ingress.
Okay.
Right now it's off by default. By the way, I don't know if people are aware. Right now we ship with the Ingress disabled by default. So the user will need to explicitly say ingress.enable true. So they will do that. They will get a load balancer and IP address for the legacy Ingress, for the Kubernetes Ingress. They use cert managers, they get a certificate. Certificate is in a secret, everyone is happy.
Okay.
And then they switch the domain to virtual service, which is a normal process we recommend them to do if they are already using Ingress and they are transitioning to virtual service.
Right, but that's a bit of a problem. They will not necessarily be interested in doing that.
Well, if they need to use
like an extra step.
But that's fine. They can keep using the Ingress. It's not a problem. They're still using Istio Ingress. They're still using Istio. They're still getting metrics. What they do not get is the traffic split and other features that they get through. Well,
virtual services.
Even that is not a problem because many policies apply it. Again, it's a choice. It's not really the end of the world if they keep using Ingress.
Okay, so that's one solution. Like the other solution we discussed is
forking and patching cert manager to solve this problem.
So that was
in a week. and getting it built, because
or maybe not in a week, maybe for like one.
For one, there's no question.
Right?
That's what we want to do. I mean, for one, we'll definitely fork or convince them to take a patch to use the gateway. I mean, it's just that it's a bit late. Anyways, that's my story.
Cert Manager is an interface that has an integration with Acme or Let's Encrypt, so I could use Cert Manager to get a cert from Let's Encrypt, but the problem is it only works with Kubernetes Ingress controller. Is that right? Not Gateway?
Yes.
Right. So it has apparently, you just explained to me, it has some code that really creates the ingress programmatically. It gets the IP, it does everything. So it's in the code. It's not something that's configurable.
Yeah, and there is a patch actually, and there are patches in progress, but they are not yet upstream. So we know we can get it with Gateway working, but we either need to fork it or we need to wait. And it's not going to happen in 1.0. The side effect and the other problems that we want to discuss is how do we want to manage this transition between legacy ingress, Kubernetes ingress, and gateway. I mean, the current mechanism is we have these two IP addresses, and user start with ingress, or they have existing ingress. They create the virtual service on the other IP address, and then they gradually switch the DNS basically from one to the other. So for a while, they have in parallel both ingress and the virtual service, and after they test that virtual service works, they can switch the DNS and that's it, which is a pretty clean and nice, but it has a side effect that you need two IP addresses and you need to modify the DNS. I can live with that. I mean, the alternative would be to handle the legacy ingress on the same gateway and have a single IP address, but again, that's a choice that we...
So the alternative to this entire problem can also be to...
Will be solved by if we point the ingress, so the Kubernetes ingress resources can be handled by any ingress we choose, by any workload, by any gateway. So the ingress gateways that we use for gateways can also handle Kubernetes ingress resources.
Right, but we decided previously to keep the code clean and separated, right?
Yes.
But so if we go this path, we handle both, then will that solve the problem completely?
It will make it easier, because that will mean you can keep using ingress resources, legacy ingress resources and gateway as long as you want.
Okay.
And the only issue is that you cannot have one domain, so example.com, with both ingress, Kubernetes ingress, and virtual service.
What if let's say I already have a Kubernetes ingress with example.com, but I deploy it, I actually plan to migrate to gateway. Would that... To
virtual service?
Gateway.
Yes.
Virtual
so you create the virtual service will be rejected, will not be applied because there is already a domain.
Okay.
And then you delete the ingress and virtual service will work. So once you delete the old ingress, virtual service will start working.
Oh, I see. So it will be... so the virtual service will be accepted. Will be there, but not operational.
Yes.
And the moment you delete the ingress, do we actually watch for ingresses?
Yeah, we recompute. We recompute everything.
Okay.
The other option, again, I discussed with Sriram and we went back and forth, is if we see that a particular domain has both virtual service and ingress, we can just take virtual service and give it priority. Right now, I believe Nate implemented by time. I mean, the oldest resource take priority, but we can switch to, in this case, to virtual service. I think it's a bit too late for 1.0 to make this change. So,
but from the user perspective, that would be easier, right?
No, it's not necessary.
No?
I mean, it's going to create more confusion. I mean, you saw all the ingress bugs that we have, and it's always a can of worms with respect to this ingress thing, and people will start expecting this and that to work. And the thing is, I'm just really, really leery of enabling any form of merging this close to the release cycle, basically because we've not had any user testing so far, and of all the testing that we've had for the last 2 months and 2.5 months from 0.8, yes, I mean, we've been shipping with 2 gateways with 2 load balancer IPs, I guess, but I guess and that's why extra resources is a safer option to the extent that if somebody wants to basically hey, I only have 1 load balancer, then we could also tackle this through clear documentation and or additional Istio YAML, which basically says Istio YAML with just the gateway and Istio YAML with just the ingress controller and or with both. You see what I'm saying? It's like it's an additional installation step, but it's clearer in terms of the message. Whereas operationally, it's still like, you know, very, very like separate entities that you only get one behavior if you use that, or if you get used to this, use this, and we don't have to worry about, like, you know, we've not seen any of the other same bugs that come from the Ingress thing. Today, I'm trying to merge this. I'm trying to have, as you said, virtual service with the domain specified. Why is this not working? And then we have to explain to them that no, until you delete this, it won't work. And then they'd be like, but how do I migrate? How do I know if it is working? I don't want to simply delete it and then everything just goes kaput. And then, you know, then at that time, somebody is already using this in production, and then we'd have to write some code to do this merging and so on and so forth, which just takes us back to whatever we were doing before.
I agree with timing. I mean, given the timing, I think that's the safest option. I want to mention, to confess that my recent patches, I should have been aware. So right now in Helm, there is an option to actually enable this kind of mode where the gateway is operating as both Ingress, and so if a user really has this need, they have a way. And there was always a way, because the generated resources can specify any gateways they choose. I mean, you can, and that's a very good thing, because you can point the Ingress to, you can have 5 gateways, and you can choose which one will handle the Ingress resources.
Okay.
So you may have an internal load balance. You can have, you know, any kind of option that you want.
Right.
But it's complicated, and it's only for advanced users. And the default, which is kind of the subject of discussion here, I think going with what Shriram was saying, which is the safest option, is reasonable.
So Shriram, I'm not sure at what point you joined, and if you heard about
I heard the whole thing.
Certificate manager's problem.
More aware than he
Yeah.
probably ever wanted.
So I mean, given all that, apparently, like, so the solutions were to to create the Ingress, then translate it to Gateway plus Virtual Service, right? So just to get the certificate. What I proposed was really to fork stuff and make some code change. I don't know if people think that's
it's
doable.
Not. I mean, so it's not just about that. I mean, so they are watching Ingress resources and creating Ingress resources on the fly. And they would have to change that to create one merged gateway, or basically create like gateway servers with distinct port names. And they have to watch our CRDs, and they have to like ingest our CRD, whatever the Go types.
No. Right now, sorry, Shriram. So there are patches for that. I mean, there is that fork that can work with gateway. The problem is that we cannot ship that fork because it's some individual developer.
Yes.
We would have to make our own, right? We will have to make our own.
Third-party code. This is also not ours officially. The cert manager stuff. So we might just have to be respectful of the fact that they don't have support, but we can always tell them, like, you know, say, hey, can you please support these gateways? And we'd get that in as a proper, you know, through the open source channels. Because then they are interested in getting feedback and, you know, supporting that as well. So I don't think they'd be opposed to supporting this in any way. It's just that doing that in 1 week will probably end up causing us more trouble, because then we'll have to look at what happens in 1.1, where you have to support the old one and the new one. And that's not something we want to take on, especially with this third-party component where, you know, we don't know how the code works and all the other bugs and so on and so forth, right? So
that's definitely not a good idea to go with the third party. So then, so what I hear here would be, we will stay with the creating the Ingress, translating that. Also try to convince, like maybe submit a PR to cert manager, or help that PR get into be able to use gateways instead of ingresses. So that's hopefully that will get in maybe in the next Kubernetes release, which is
not Kubernetes.
Sorry, that's certificate managers. Okay, maybe it's actually faster. Maybe
probably one will have it. I think that's fine.
Cadence is better.
And for Ingress, are we staying with the current status where Ingress is off by default, and users who have legacy Kubernetes will need to enable it explicitly?
I would say yes, because then that's the smoothest upgrade path for people who have already tried this, and they have written any tooling and so on. That
it's not actually it's opposite. I mean, it's good for people who only use gateway and adopt Istio from start, but for migration, it's the opposite.
Oh, yes. If they're gonna, I guess if you're migrating, you already have like other issues, and I mean, you already have to do a whole bunch of other things, right? And so you're not going to be doing a simple Istio YAML install and then do the whole thing, right? So it's like, you mean migration mean upgrade from 0.8 to 1, or is it?
No, I'm saying you already have ingresses in your system because you are using Ingress for your existing system. You deploy Istio.
Right, I think that can be very easily tackled with the documentation, where we have to have a specific section which says if you're migrating from old Ingress, then this is what you have to do. Where we tell them like run this Helm command and basically ensure you generate the one with the Ingress gateway itself, and have the other one in hand, but don't enable it yet, because make sure everything works first and stuff is all running, and then you turn on the other gateway without the load balancer itself, and add the rules, and then slowly switch off traffic from one to the other. Or it's just an atomic update for the load balancer IP. But that's part of that operational book, the doc book or SRE book that we wanted to write, where we should tell people this is how you should migrate, in production when you're doing this thing, which we have to write anyway. It's not either way. Even if we do it magically, we just have to write it so that people would know and how it works and how to troubleshoot, right? So it's might as well tackle it from the docs.
And also, if they have an Ingress, they probably have an Ingress controller, and
yes,
they can keep using it until they.
And at that point, we could also inject a sidecar into the Ingress controller, and stuff would still work, right? Because
and actually, have a test for that. We have Nginx with sidecar testing.
Exactly.
So okay. I think we are in agreement.
So Ingress off by default, basically. And who's going to write the migration path in the doc?
Migration.
Like we need somebody to help.
One of us.
If you write one, I can just clean it up and I can make it better. I just need some initial content to start with, and I can just.
Yeah, I have some old docs laying around with the process to migrate. Let me see what I can dig up. Sure, and I'll send it your way.
Okay.
Great, Zach. Thank you.
Okay,
so let me
off.
record here. Ingress off by default. Zach and Sriram will write the
migration document.
Well, I don't know who's highlighted here. I'll write the migration doc. Okay, perfect.
Cool. So Ingress is resolved.
Sounds
hopefully
good.
Forever, because one will not.
Well, I think that once we will have the patch in Cert Manager, it will actually be resolved forever, or for a while at least. Okay, good. So anything else people want to add to this topic? Because is everybody in sync with what we just discussed and agreed here?
Hey, do you guys have the Cert Manager PR somewhere? Is that already this?
It is already in. It's working. It's an option. It's an optional component.
So, for Istio.
For Istio, so you do Helm install cert manager.enable = true.
Okay, thank you. I'm a little bit confused on Ingress off by default. So how does that work? I mean, if I'm a Kubernetes user and my Ingress controller is already there, how do you force people to disable Ingress?
Oh, no, sorry.
Istio Ingress off by default.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, got it.
Yes, when we install Istio in kubectl, you get a gateway, but you don't get the Ingress controller enabled. And by the way, I think there is a small bug somewhere where there is some resource that keeps getting updated, but that's a small issue. I'll try to clean up the log.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me now. Thank you.
Okay.
And a question about the migration path. Is it something automatic, or the users will have to rewrite all their Ingress configuration?
I believe we still have the tool that converts Ingress to virtual service.
It's converted automatically at runtime. So it's not even a tool. It's just like if you have an Ingress, if we use the Ingress resource, then that converts it. Oh,
no. It's
you mean the conversion tool? Oh, the tool is I think that tool is gone. Yeah,
we may need to bring it back. Yeah.
Yeah, we could bring that small tool alone back. Yeah.
The issue is that we convert automatically and everything works if we use the Ingress controller. But if we want to switch completely to gateway, you need to.
We should bring that tool back. I meant to comment in that PR to say that we shouldn't delete it.
Well, most of it can be gone because it's alpha 1 conversion, but that piece of
But
it,
that specific piece, yeah,
yes.
it has value.
But it's not a very hard conversion. I mean, I think user can do it by hand and
no, but if we
understand.
have right, but if we have code laying around that we can just bring back that helps the UX, we should do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
Okay, good. So next topic I added here because I was personally a bit confused about the whole gateway business, especially when it
so
relates.
one interruption, like so these two things are like more like a design level things, whereas the one that's on the bottom is more like a chore level thing. So if we finish that, then we'll have the rest of the time to talk about the gateway stuff.
So the one at the bottom, you mean this, like remove pilots sidecar? Okay, let's move that, sure, because that's the exactly that
simple one just finished.
So I don't see Quad here, but or Yossi, who are all involved in that PR.
Yeah, I can talk for Yossi. I mean, but it's like the question is whether we run the sidecar and pilot or whether we do the MTLS within pilot itself. And I can add another data point, which is that when I try to deploy the minimal version of Istio, which has no, let's say, mixer, nothing else except for just pilot and maybe the Citadel if need be, the pilot sidecar was constantly crashing because it has hard-coded mixer dependencies. It expects to go talk to the mixer to send telemetry and so on and so forth, and that thing is not there. Yeah, because the whole idea behind those sidecars is to send telemetry to the mixer, and there is no optional way to disable that, right? The whole thing is just I'm going to send telemetry, and that thing keeps crashing, and it's in what you call perpetual.
No, I know what you're saying. I didn't realize. I was not aware of this problem.
So then that
it's clear, I think.
So at that point, it doesn't really help that incremental. I can send a small PR that actually maybe a Helm chart or something which shows how to customize it to just launch. I mean, this turns off all plugins, not even Citadel. It's just only pilot and like one gateway if you want to, and by using the command line option in pilot to turn off all the plugins and so on and so forth. And in that mode, this thing just keeps spinning and literally crashes, and then like spins out.
Yeah, we could fix it and basically to remove, I mean, based on some Helm option to not have that, but that's, I think, hard-coded in the image. It's not even easy to do.
It's in the image. It's actually in the pilot agent, which actually generates the what you call it.
It's in the proxy v2. Yeah, it's a hard-coded file in proxy v2, so you cannot modify it with Helm template. Good riddance, I think. That's, I mean, I was thinking it's safer at this point to keep it, but it doesn't have any value really, because also metrics.
So you're right. So because we do gRPC streams, we don't get valuable metrics today. But A, we are looking at addressing that, and B, I do think that there is some merit to kind of eating our own dog food. I think it's important that we do run the control plane behind our sidecars if we can.
But that doesn't necessarily mean a sidecar. I mean, like eating our own dog food means me following our own principles, but it does not necessarily mean running a sidecar, because the whole idea behind sidecar is it simplifies your development methodology, because not everybody has to focus on the same basic things. But we being experts and design the control plane, we can add this for performance, for reliability, and a whole bunch of other things for our side, because it's like, yes, we implement all the same things that you do. So you talk to Istio using the same Istio auth, and you get the same metrics and comes through mixer and so on and so forth.
If I can add a small point here, I mean, because many people raise the issue of eating our own dog food, and I want to make it clear that Mixer team is working on direct API, and that's also dog food. I mean, things that we recommend to users. So if you have gRPC server, you can integrate directly with Mixer.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's ready or not. And second,
but it's not ready, right? So
it goes the same argument as what you're saying, right? It goes in the same argument as like in the gRPC stream interpretation. That like
that's fair.
That's also not.
And also we want to show people that you can integrate directly with the Certificate Manager, and the way that Pilot is authenticating and is sending authentication is something that we recommend for people who do direct integration with Istio and with the CA. And if we want to show that the sidecar is used, we can put one on Prometheus, we can put it on Grafana, which actually do need, and they don't have a solution for this kind of stuff.
I mean, so I think that's fair. I think that's fair for 1.0. I think we should revisit that, especially after
if anything, they could use the sidecar with the TLS inspector, because then it would just simply work for internal MTLS and external access over normal HTTP. the publication.
And that feature is available, right?
Yeah, and
TLS sniffing.
Yeah, no, and they can use standard pilot. I mean, they're not in the hard-coded configuration. I mean, pilot is special because pilot is generating configs, and it's not good to generate configs for itself. But for Grafana, Prometheus, and all the other components, we could easily generate configs. I was not aware. I mean, my thinking was that since it's not critical, there is no obvious bug, we can delay it until 1.1. But if you with this crash, I was not aware. So now,
if you remove it, there is a crash, right?
No,
like,
if you don't remove it, mixer. So people a la carte.
But we definitely want to have support for a la carte. Yes.
So basically,
that's like one of the main paradigms here.
No, I do think that's way more important. I agree.
And probably we should add a test for a la carte. I mean, since you have a configuration, maybe we can put an end-to-end test of.
Well, we could run one of the E2E tests in a la carte mode where like pilot test just runs only pilot, and like, you know, the no auth version could run without Citadel, without Mixer, without anything else. And that's just the
I've wanted to. Yeah, I've wanted to do that for.
And as a side effect, it will have a faster test because the test will be faster.
Yes.
So that's, well, 2 birds, 1 stone. I think it's perfect.
So I'm still like a bit confused about the plan here.
Merging. I think that at this
point. So merging,
that
means we remove it.
We remove it, yes. We merge the PR that removes the sidecar.
Okay. And since Squat is not here because he had a very strong opinion against
he may have
this,
but
I invited him.
If he wants to fix a bug, I mean, he has a fix, we can discuss, bring it back, but it's, we have a PR that is ready that fixes a bug. If he has an alternative PR, we can discuss it later.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, the a la carte argument is very strong, actually. So unless we have this, Yeah,
I totally agree. We should at least just loop in the policy and telemetry team so they know. I know that Kuat and Doug were both on the PR, but like, yeah, we should at least make sure that they're aware of what's happening.
Yeah. Okay, gateway types.
Okay, so let me actually just put here plus Squad plus Doug, so they have a chance to.
Yeah, I'll leave them after.
Understand. Okay, yes, please the details there. So about the gateway types. So we have right now we have a gateway API definition, and the gateway can fulfill multiple conceptual roles. So we can have an external facing gateway. We can have a gateway that's in a way external to the cluster, but internal to the mesh. We can have the external gateway. And yesterday there was a discussion to pre-create a gateway to connect to it all the Istio services like Prometheus, Grafana, monitoring, and whatever else would be stuff people would not normally expose to the outside world, but they may still want to have connected to some sort of internal-ish gateway. So we have all these types, and we don't have anything, any document to actually explain our thinking and how people could actually use the gateway besides the logical and well understood meaning for ingress, right? And I can write something like that. Maybe we should put it on Istio.io if people agree.
But which one do you want to document? I mean, the internal meshes. I mean, what we are doing for Grafana, for example, that's, you know, it's an option that is documented. Say, if you want Grafana to be exposed with Ingress, we already had that in the past. You turn the option on and Grafana will be exposed.
Right. But
how we do it, it's our problem. I mean,
yeah, exactly. But I want to document a bit the use cases. For instance, the mesh gateway, quote mesh, which is in fact when we apply virtual services to like inner services, right? So we refer to the mesh gateway, which does not exist in configuration, at least for now. We may want to have an explicit mesh in the future, right? But
why?
People
for mesh is
so that's the thing. We refer to a thing that does not exist really. It's not configured, and it's a reserved thing. But as a user, I come and I read all this and I don't understand. Like there is a reference in the blog that Frank wrote But I think it's still not very clear. I've been talking with people. I've been getting a lot of questions about these various
the mesh itself.
about the mesh gateway. What is this for? And about
mesh
like
gateway?
do I use one gateway versus the other?
So it's the default gateway that you used to configure. You used to write rules for all the sidecars inside the mesh. So when you write a virtual service and you want that monolith's name to appear to all the other sidecars inside the mesh so that they can refer to it, you don't have to target every sidecar in the mesh and write a source based rule. You just simply it's same as writing a rule which applies to all sidecars.
And to be clear, if you just don't put a gateway in your virtual service, it targets the mesh gateway.
It targets the mesh gateway. So
if you don't put this,
yes.
maybe hold on, because that's an entirely different thing. If that one is implicit, we should not list it at all.
No, it is implicit when it is not explicit.
It is explicit. It is both.
If you don't have anything else defined, as soon as you add a second gateway, then the mesh one's not there. You have to explicitly add it.
So my God!
Is that
this
true?
is even more complicated
So the documentations will definitely need to be improved, and if anyone wants to update the doc and put more wording to.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to do that because I personally struggle to understand. So, which means the concepts are not simple. Like my mind can only understand simple things.
Well, and that behavior is clearly broken. Like we should go address
a little better. But the other question is, would it make sense to have a explicit gateway defined in some config file somewhere that you could look at that represents the mesh? Or would that not really be an interesting thing anyway?
Because
that was my.
We'd have to add all the hosts in the service registry into that mesh gateway, because per the gateway configuration, only the host defined in the gateway can actually be allowed in. And you can define a wildcard, but then it only for HTTP, and you could do a wildcard for HTTP. At that point, what happens is that if you mix that with multiple gateways within the virtual service, then you're looking at one of them having I'll accept anything, somebody else, others having
Sorry, I mean that's impossible because the mesh gateway listens on all ports.
Yes, on all multiple
thing. So we don't have a port.
You need to put 65,000 rules there, and it's
right. And so at that point, this is effectively going to be contort the gateway specification to make the whole thing as an optional, and then say this is mesh. And at that point, it's no longer a gateway specification. It's just a namesake, because it has nothing configuration that you can tweak and configure and change. Are you ever going to go and say mesh gateway, I'm only going to accept these internal service registries and everything else is gone? I don't think so, because that's not how pilot would work. It's just too
So documentation is clear,
but we need to fix. Well, but we need to fix the issue that if I create a gateway, the mesh one ceases to exist, because that's clearly a bug.
No, the mesh one exists. If you create a virtual service where you don't specify the mesh as a gateway, you specify something else as a gateway, then it only applies to the.
Yes. Okay. Yes, that totally makes sense.
I think what it means is if you create a gateway and you call it mesh, bad things may happen.
Yeah. So there is no validation, right?
That's not what you meant, Zach. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's a good. Yeah.
That we should reject if we're going to reserve that name. I do think it's weird the gateway doesn't show up in config, but it just can't.
Yes. For me, that's a big problem. And the second problem I just heard is what Frank just mentioned, that if it's implicit and explicit in the same time. If there's another gateway, you have to list it.
I mean, it is documented pretty clear.
But it is convoluted. It's not,
it is pragmatic. It is pragmatic.
If you don't list the gateway, it applies to the mesh. If you list the gateway, it applies to the gateways you list.
Yeah.
That's the simplest rule that we could implement. So if you wanted to apply to the mesh and you're listing other gateways, that you have to list the mesh as well.
Yeah, you are either explicit or implicit.
I think the way Zach just said it is right. It applies to the mesh unless you say there's gateways that it applies to, and then it applies to those gateways, and mesh has to be explicitly added.
Yeah.
So what about taking what Zach said and putting in a doc?
Exactly.
Well, that's the whole idea. So we definitely need something to clarify all this, okay? Because people are not yet users in general. They are used to Kubernetes Ingress only, and the gateway plus virtual service concepts are more powerful, right? So they allow some more use cases, and we need to have we need to show the way basically how they're supposed to use that. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm trying to do stuff like work on blog content, for example. So like in the next little bit, I have some gateway stuff that we can publish and that kind of thing to try and help understanding. Because I think that's really the key is like, we can document a lot of this, but a lot of it is just kind of best practices that really don't quite belong in the official documentation, but just need to be online somewhere. And so that's where
I think those should go into the SRE docs that we want to write, the ops docs or whatever, the operations
100%.
docs.
Yeah.
Why not put them in the docs with the description of gateway? This is why
Well, there's
gateway
no-
exists.
yeah.
Because those things change over time, and it's a different category of documentation, right?
Yeah,
The docs on the gateway itself are the technical things about how gateways work and how to use them. These are best practices to apply those, which is a little bit different.
Right.
So-
So I don't think it hurts to have more documentation than less, definitely, right? So I
It
think
just
we're
becomes
good.
hard to
And for
maintain.
now, we don't really need any, or at least we won't make any change. Like my proposal was initially to have a gateway configuration for the mesh. And that's obviously, like, as you guys heard, with the host name, plus the fact we don't have a port, apparently it's not something we can do right now. And another thing was to have a field that describes the usage of a gateway, whether it's internal, external, and so on. But that also doesn't make too much sense. So the expectation is people will use a good name for the gateway so that they don't get confused.
Let me get in a bit on this topic a bit, because I don't know if it was discussed on it. Everyone is aware of the fact that we have an option to turn on the mesh expansion. In 0.2, we had a separate file where you need to apply, and if you apply that file, you get the mesh expansion. Now we have an option you have. And there are actually two options, not one. One that creates a mesh expansion using the main gateway by exposing pilot on its port. And there is another option that creates a separate gateway of type internal load balancer. The internal load balancer is matching what we had in 0.2. The using main gateway is just using the same port and using the 0 VPN light option of forwarding a port. That's kind of wanted to make sure that people hear about in the meeting. And it's used by the multi-cluster environments.
So turning on mesh expansion will deploy the gateway for the, how should we call this, external mesh? How is this called?
This was called the mesh expansion. This is the name that we use in 0.2. The option in 1.0 is to do mesh expansion using the normal gateway, the internet gateway, or use mesh expansion using internal load balancer.
But this is not an internal, so that name maybe is not good.
Internal load balancer is internal. There is no, well, that's name we can adjust it if you.
Because you may be able in the future to do mesh expansion with 0 VPN. It's not going to be internal.
But the mesh expansion with 0 VPN is the first option. That's exactly what 0 VPN will do.
Yeah, but no, for that way, we might still have a separate gateway. So the external gateway we will keep for users that want to connect to some service, while like intra-service communication may use another gateway also, right?
Sure, but it'll probably be the same physical workload that implements it. So that's like not a
really,
that's not a huge problem.
I think it's actually good to separate the workloads for the QPS.
No, but that requires separate IP address.
The point of 0 VPN is that you don't need to do that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it depends.
That's the whole point.
It depends on how you do horizontal scaling, right? Like if you have a high number of QPAs, you may need to do horizontal scaling, at which point it's actually better to separate the traffic you care about versus some other traffic.
Let's not get into, I mean, we have multi-regional deployments, or you'll have multiple IP addresses per continent and per region and per whatever. So there are many use cases for, that's why we have gateway, to be able to support arbitrary deployments and
precisely.
We just discussed Ingress on separate.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, I think we'll probably get more input from users and various deployment option, and we'll get better at that.
Yeah, and that's something we.
Go ahead.
That's something we're probably going to want to be prescriptive on as well, right? That's like part of the reason I'm trying to work on some content like that, is so that we can prescribe some patterns to use there.
Okay. Good. I'd like to actually give some time to the topic that was just added to the agenda. Discuss network operators guided. Okay. Yes. And who added this?
Andre, I added it. So I volunteered to start working on this a little bit. And just I want to get some thoughts if anybody has it in this meeting. In fact, the prior conversation actually hit on some of the thoughts, which is, some of these best practices would be good to have in an operator's guide. But specifically to try to make some progress on this, if you look at the content it's planned to replace, it's like the FAQ and the troubleshooting. And we can constrain it to sort of just kind of replacing and more getting a better flow for the FAQ and the troubleshooting sections right now. But as a true operator's guide, you would want more. You'd want some configuration stuff. You'd want more information on how to display the state of things, more to be able to sort of spot check how Istio, how the mesh, whatever is running. I think the risk is to try to jump right into that, is that a lot of that content is already in Istio.io in other areas, like in the tasks and in some of the concepts. So I just wanted to throw this out there if anybody had thought through this or had an idea. And if not, I think my approach will be to sort of start putting together a flow that has like configuration and state, but mostly just has pointers to our other content. So those sections will be not a lot. There won't be a large volume to those sections, but there'll be a section to provide a flow. But there'll be point to the task sections or the some of the other configuration sections, but the most voluminous content would be, to replace the FAQ and the troubleshooting. So just wanted to get any thoughts people had before we launch into this.
I think you're totally in sync with sort of the thinking anyway. So I think what you said is right, that the first thought was to sort of take the troubleshooting and fact stuff and sort of rework some of those things a little cleaner and structure them into categories and put that into there. And the other thing you said was also kind of the idea is to make this more of a higher level, point you off to other docs, like talk about high level problems and say, here, go and read this and that, rather than trying to have like a ton of documentation right here directly. So I think that's kind of what you said you're leaning towards, and that was the current thinking. In terms of timing, I think in terms of timing, though, I think that really there's, replacing the troubleshooting, getting that troubleshooting stuff into this was sort of the first step.
Okay. I actually think we need this operational guide along with the troubleshooting and the FAQ, because troubleshooting is for some very concrete problems one may have, right? While the operational guide is more general about how to configure, how to deploy, how to do stuff. Troubleshooting is when you try the operational guide and you hit errors.
But troubleshooting is what most people will hit, and that's where it documents undocumented features. I mean, if you
look at the troubleshooting and FAQ, how they relate, some stuff's there. So I think the FAQ stuff stays around, but the discussion, at least my understanding of the discussion that was had here was that, you don't need a specific document called troubleshooting, because this is kind of it. This is where you go for troubleshooting. And so the troubleshooting material is kind of here organized in a nice way. It's just not called a troubleshooting guide.
Yeah, because the current if you look at the current troubleshooting, there were really point issues that people had, very specific point issues. It's not really troubleshooting. It's not really giving people a good view of how do I go find a problem. It's just here was a problem. If you see it, do this.
It's almost like, why is this here rather than the FAQ? Or just let's move it out and put it into a more structured place. Here's how to do things. So I think the word troubleshooting is the only issue here. But that kind of information is all going to be captured in a nice place that you go and say, here are operator type issues. And here's an FAQ that might point you up to this, in fact, in some cases.
Right.
I would say people use Google to find whatever content, and either way is fine as long as we finish in 1 week, basically. And we can.
I think this is an evolving.
I know.
Right? If we don't finish in 1 week and we finish in 1 week and a half, it's just implementation, right?
But we need to have something decent in 1 week, even if it's not complete. And we'll keep iterating over it. And we can't trust you to, whatever makes sense to put it there, and if you volunteered for it, and.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to buy shed if it's FAQ or virtual whatever trouble.
Yeah, I think also Martin Taillefer had a document with a proposal. So I don't know, John. I saw somebody sent that document to you. Have you looked through it? Because he also had a proposal along these lines. And he's in vacation, so he cannot object.
I'm not sure I saw that. I'll have to check all my folders to make sure.
Okay.
But I'll look at that. Also,
I'll add it
Frank,
here as well and add you as a CCU directly, so you get the email.
But it would be ideal if something is, you decide something, you put it there so people can contribute additional topics, because that's kind of where we can multiplex, we can parallelize.
Right. Just go ahead with what you have. It's going to be great. That's the idea.
Okay.
Thank you for taking the initiative.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. And I think that's it. We managed to finish earlier, unless there are some more topics or questions or.
If you put it this way, nobody will.
And nobody wants to ask anything. I just want to go back. One more quick question about the previous topic, about the workloads for these new gateways. So the mesh expansion one, it identifies, the pod, but you're saying there's not going to be an actual server, pods, workloads implemented in the control plane that are running by default?
For mesh, the mesh itself.
Yeah. The mesh expansion stuff you said.
Oh, for the mesh expansion. For the mesh expansion, sorry. No, for the mesh expansion, yes, there is. So in the first option, it's using the existing Ingress gateway workload and is redirecting traffic from external clusters or from mesh expansion to this gateway, to Ingress gateway. So Ingress gateway opens a new
the same one.
It opens the pilot. You want to access the pilot, right?
No.
So you add pilot as a backend service to the existing gateway.
Pilot and Istio CA. So it opens two different ports, one for Istio CA, one for pilot, and then those are used. And then Mixer and everything else EDS. It's not a problem. In the second option, it creates a separate workload, which is a different gateway. And that gateway is completely separate and has different service, different pod.
And that one has its own IP as well.
It has own IP, yes.
Yeah, so that one, in a way, it's more, I guess it can also be secure with different certificates and all that, right? Because you may not want to...
You can secure a single workload with different certificates with the Gateway API.
Yeah,
that's a good point. So in theory, you could use one gateway for everything.
No.
The only problem would be the actual load on that workload.
Load is fine because you can scale it. Auto-scaling works now. Apparently, I tested auto-scaling and it's relatively good.
Yeah. That's the whole... Yeah. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. What I want to say is the second use case is for people who are not comfortable to expose pilot to the open internet, and they want to have a private behind the firewall address. That's kind of the only difference. Google is exposing pretty much all services over HTTPS on the public internet, but not everyone has this opinion.
But yeah.
Interesting.
Is there documentation of sort of how to install and set up for these different use cases, or not? Not at 1.0 timeframe.
Yes, I'll try to update the documentation. I put comments in the values.yaml, and I think there is auto-generated documentation from that. But probably we will definitely need to update the guides for mesh expansion. That's on my to-do list after I finish with the code changes. By the way, Friday, I think we're trying to cut a final build.
Friday, like on the 27th, or like this Friday, tomorrow?
So we have tomorrow. So we have testing, and then.
But hold on, because we're waiting for the new Envoy. So Piotr found the leak, and yesterday,
found another leak.
Okay, I think
or both of them.
Somebody found both of them. Worked together, found the leak. So I think we'll be able to actually get the new Envoy.
If it's ready by Friday, which is usually means Monday.
It's done and it's merged in. I mean, the Envoy thing is merged in. I think it's only the changes to pilot to use the new option. That's the only thing that also PR for that. So I think that will also merge today. And then if the Prow people can fix that Prow thing, because every time I do a retest, it just skips the entire test. Then I have to do every time I
make a change.
The Prow people? Who's the Prow people?
Every time it fails, some test fails due to flake, I try to do a /test bookinfo thing. It will skip the test and mark the test as passed. and then I have to do a full retest of all Prow tests, which takes another an hour, and then the whole cycle repeats. It's very annoying, actually.
Yes.
Shriram, I don't think we can get this fixed today or tomorrow because
the Prow,
the Prow thing.
No, but he has a PR, right? So we see
the PR is there. We need to merge it. That's clear. I mean,
so in any case, we need to wait for that PR, especially now that the leak is fixed and we have the new Envoy that fixes all the TCP stuff. We need to include that in the release.
Well,
okay.
If we don't find any other issues, but yes, in general, it will be. And I think Friday means Monday, really.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so actually the last I heard about the release was end of month. Like
No, but we are not going to not test to release it.
Of course, but still, like it still gives us a few days. And I think once we cut this final, hopefully, release, maybe everybody can do another quick round with the installation, and at least the traffic management part would be great, especially because we changed the Envoy.
And upgrade and all the other tests that we need to. Yeah, that's why we want to have a final build so it goes again through another round of testing and it's stable. Yeah.
Hey, Costin, I have a quick question on the mesh expansion. Does it still require a flat network with the new way?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. There is zero VPN, which is scheduled for later. I mean, we now have all the elements for zero VPN, but it's priorities.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, it's to give you false hope.
So we didn't do the extra step of just rerouting the sidecars to the Ingress. I guess that's not very easy, actually.
Okay, let me put it this way. If you know what you're doing and you do some complicated configuration, you can already have this working without flat network for few services. If you have a small number of services, I think Shriram had a demo for something, and it's possible to do it today. But it's a huge pain, and it's not really something we want to tell people to try.
Right. So if I have so if I have non-flat network, I would have to expose my services on the VMs through the Istio Ingress gateway to be able to access. I think that's what you guys are saying.
That's step number one. And step number two is you need to modify the remote cluster to take the address of the service to be the gateway address, not the EDS. To not get it from EDS.
Yeah, there's kind of
Either
you need to modify it again.
So on the remote cluster, you cannot get the address of the service from EDS because EDS will give you addresses in the main network, which is not accessible. So you need to do some hacks to get the address of the service overwritten to be the gateway address.
Basically, for the zero VPN.
For zero VPN.
Of course. Like you obviously cannot use the internal. Like
I know. Right. But it's possible. I mean, it's doable.
But that's not like for now.
It's
Whoever wants to play with this,
it's not something we are documenting.
I think that's like a good roadmap item for we're done with this 1.0 and maybe like more stuff for 1.1.
And 1.01.
We still have a few items that were pushed to 1.1 where they're really important. So,
and 1.01 will probably be an issue. I mean, if we find any users will find any bugs, we'll probably need to consider 1.01. Yeah.
But I mean, this is the whole zero VPN.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
This is all involved.
This is the cool upcoming stuff.
Yeah, we're not going to be out of work.
All right, so I think we're almost to the top of the hour. So thanks, everybody. I think we had a very good discussion and good decisions, good agreements on stuff. So hopefully next time we meet, we'll have 1.0.
Now let's talk with Doug to see what he thinks.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Enjoy the rest of your day.